In this short video, we delve into the impactful legacy of Käthe Kollwitz. Kollwitz enrolled in the Berlin School of Art in the early 1900s. She became one of the most renowned printmakers of her century. Today, we will be analyzing the significance of Kollwitz's Woman with Dead Child, an etching completed in 1903. Despite limitations on color and her chosen medium, Kollwitz manages to successfully deliver the emotion, delicate details, and meaning of her work. Kollwitz's work often addresses broader themes of human suffering, social injustice, and the impact of war on families, which she witnessed on the streets of Berlin through 2 world wars. She believed that art was capable of leading to social change. The composition and pose of the mother and child draw parallels with the traditional Christian imagery of the Pietà. Though not overly religious herself, the universality of maternal grief that Kollwitz depicts in Woman with Dead Child allows viewers to find connections with various cultural and religious narratives, including the sorrow of the Virgin Mary. However, the personal context behind this etching gives more insight into its significance. Kollwitz gave birth to 2 sons, Hans and Peter. During the process of sketching her work, Kollwitz used her younger son Peter and herself as models. Recounts from one of her letters state, "When he was 7 years old and I was working on the etching, I did a drawing of myself holding him on my arm in front of the mirror." Nearly 10 years later, Peter died in action on one of the fronts of World War I. Hans Kollwitz, the elder son, recounts, "She thought she foresaw Peter's death, and even then, she said she had been crying while working on those images." During the same year of 1903, when the etching was created, Kollwitz drew works with a similar theme of a mother with a dead child, further solidifying the idea of having predicted her son's death. Following Peter's death, Kollwitz's work now more than ever begins to revolve around the theme of a mother's grief and the devastating consequences of war on children and women. In the zoomed-in view, we can pick out the details of Kollwitz's technique. Firstly, the lighting of the figures. The sun appears to have a bright forehead facing upward to the sky, alluding to the homage previously mentioned, the death of Christ, who goes to heaven, a place full of light. In contrast, the mother's face is looking downwards, away from the light and into her son. Her facial features are dark, more shadowed, and so are her gripping fingers. The strokes of the etching are also contrasting. The son's face is completed in a delicate manner, full of precise yet gentle detail. The mother's body is expressed in rough and forceful strokes, indicating the anguish she feels at the sight of her dead son. In a broader view, we see the 2 strokes merge in the nape of the son's neck, where the beginning of the skin and mother's face are not clearly defined. One becomes and is the other. The position of the mother is crouched, full of visible strength in a protective embrace. She collapses onto herself and thereby shields the body of her son. We cannot determine what kind of emotions lie in the eyes of the mother, nor do we see the eyes of the son. It is an intimacy we are not granted access to, or spared from. The naked state of both figures signifies vulnerability. Without her clothes, the mother reveals her most carnal emotions of grief. This ties into the idea of the son being part of her, coming from her, and him having to go before the mother. The wrongness of having to see a son die is delivered through the composition and setting of the etching. Garland Thompson brings up the idea of staring and the unconscious but important role it plays in our lives and interactions. Though old, through his portraits aims to bring the staring that would usually be considered as rude or intrusive onto paper and make it more accessible for people to get used to and accept as normal. The woman Shyla confidently stares back and maintains the interaction between the starer and staree. Kollwitz, on the other hand, by not providing the viewer with access to the eyes of the mother, is allowing the starer to analyze the etching freely without confrontation. The audience is invited to share the experience of mourning. Grief, in this case, is incredibly personal and intimate. However, by refusing to look at us, the mother is letting the interaction become our own, for us to seek out a personal meaning within the lines of the etching. Mapplethorpe's own work, specifically this self-portrait, is audacious. It challenges the viewer, showcasing something vulgar and uncommon in an attempt to introduce us to the other. These 2 artists and works are similar because they showcase the experiences they themselves know. It is not a case in which the other is misrepresented or orientalized. We can trust what we see to be authentic. However, they differ with the consideration of the gaze. Mapplethorpe challenges and hides a part of his identity from the audience by not revealing a sign of sexual pleasure, whereas Kollwitz submits her vulnerabilities to the starers, for them to share the pain and intimacy with her. Overall, Kollwitz's Woman with Dead Child is a powerful, brave, and personal depiction of her own experience with grief, through which she attempts to evoke empathy towards the harsh reality of mothers and children during the turbulent times of war, poverty, and hunger in Germany. One cannot help but feel something tighten in the chest at the sight of the sorrow and love with which the mother clutches at her son. Don't you agree?